What if your impulsivity and your distractibility weren't issues, but they were proof that you were designed for something much bigger? I've worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs in the past decade, and I've studied many more. And the most successful ones nearly all share the same brain type. It's the same one that's responsible for the phone that's in your hand, for the lights that are in your house, and for the car that you likely drive. The same traits that made them feel broken in school made them feel unstoppable in business. So by the end of today, you're gonna know if you have this brain type yourself and how to turn it into your biggest asset instead of your biggest struggle. We'll cover how to spot this brain type, why it's built for entrepreneurship, and how to use it to unlock your unfair advantage. But first though, let me just show you where this comes from by taking you through a quick summit that I made.
Right, so thousands of years ago, long before cities, school bells, and spreadsheets, we lived very, very differently. We would wake up with the sun, we would sleep when it was safe, so we had no clocks that were governing our time. We would track prey for hours and hours on end throughout the day, and then as soon as we saw one, we would act in an instant. We would scan for danger constantly. We would always be looking out for what is about to attack us, right? So we'd be hyper vigilant. We would be looking at and listening for the rustle in the bushes because that could be prey, and either we're going to kill or we're going to get killed. We would work in short bursts of intense focus. We wouldn't have these long hours of routine that we had to stick to. And we would be mobile all the time, always ready to move or adapt. And at this point in time, thousands of years ago, our survival depended on a very specific kind of brain wiring. And we call this the hunter type. Now let's have a look at some of the hunter brain traits. So they had high energy and movement based. So hunters needed constant movement and physical engagement to track prey and avoid danger. So they had to have high levels of energy and always be moving around. They were hyper alert and reactive. So their survival depended on noticing subtle changes in the environment and responding immediately. If I just saw a lion outside my window, I need to respond quickly. Otherwise, I'm going to get got. I need to be able to respond. That's why they were hyper alert, and that was ingrained into them. They also had this immense ability to be able to hyper focus in bursts. So they had intense concentration when tracking prey or crafting tools, followed by pretty decent periods of rest. Now, these traits weren't a luxury. These were survival tools at that point in time. And in this world that they lived in that society, this is where hunters thrived. They were quick on their feet, they had sharp instincts, they were restless, impulsive, and hyper-focused when it mattered most. And to survive, they had to be. So those were tools for their survival. There then came the Great Shift. So about 10,000 years ago, everything changed. We stopped chasing things and we started planting things. This is when we entered the agricultural age, and everything then changed. With it, a new ideal human emerged, and this is called the farmer type. So at this point, we started to build fences, create routines, and organize ourselves into communities. So to thrive in this new world, you had to be a farmer. You had to be patient, predictable, routine-driven, and comfortable with repetition and delay. So let's look at some of the farmer traits, and we can position those very clearly against the hunter traits. So they were patient and routine-orientated. They were comfortable with repetition and long-term planning for seasonal cycles. So if I planted a seed today, I wasn't going to see the fruits of my labor tomorrow. I had to get comfortable with the fact that I wasn't going to see that, if ever, until at least 12 months from now. They preferred structure and predictability, so they thrived in organized environments with clear expectations and guidelines. They enjoyed rule following and they were very compliant. So they adhered to social structures and established patterns for community stability. So you'll notice like that in the farmer community, they often worked together, right? And they would swap and share crops. So these social structures then started to come about outside of their kind of initial tribes. And they also had a stable sense of emotional regulation. They were able to maintain consistent mood and approach regardless of their daily challenges, because they knew that their cycles for reward were significantly longer than that of a hunter. So the farmer's life involved waking up at the same time daily, repeating tasks for days and days on end for months, relying on long-term planning, working consistently towards outcomes, and obeying social rules. In essence, it was a life of predictability, control, and structure. There then came the cull. So as farming society started to expand, naturally farmer traits became more dominant. So here's ultimately what happened. If you compare farmers and hunters, farming produced far more food and far more calories, which meant that there was a higher population growth. Farmers bred at a much, much quicker rate than that of hunters. Societies then began to standardize behavior to maintain order, right? So farmers wanted more farmers to be around because they saw hunters as being disrupted in their structured world because they didn't conform. And over time, people with hunter brains and hunter traits were outbred for reasons I've just described. And because they had smaller tribes and less food security, that ultimately meant that there was a almost like an extinct situation that they were going through. And if that wasn't bad enough, they were often killed or punished for being different. And we see this play out even today, right? Minorities, and this is in the animal kingdom, in the human kingdom, minorities get ostracized and they typically get killed, right? So that is what happened with farmers and hunters. Farmers grew and their population grew at a very, very rapid rate. They were able to produce far more food. It was a much more efficient way of operating and living. They created heightened amount of structures, societies. This is where religions, etc. were formed. And ultimately, the hunters did not conform to that. they were the opposite of farmers, but they didn't breed at the same rate. And as a result, they slowly started to become extinct. And if we then fast track that to today, only about 10 to 20% of people carry the hunter neurotype. And as a result, the entire modern world is built almost entirely for farmers, which makes sense. If 80% of people have the farmer brain type, then they're going to have the biggest influence on the societal structures that we have and that we're living amongst today, because they are more than likely going to be the ones that have created these structures. So of course they're going to design it to suit them. But this ultimately led to a huge mismatch that I'm sure most of us with hunter brains have felt. Because as I mentioned, modern society is farmer by design. And if you don't believe me, look at school. You're told to sit still for hours and hours on end. You're told to follow rules because someone else said so. And you're taught to memorize constantly. So if you think about like the schooling system, it is very much like farming. Same with work, rigid structures. You got to be in at 9 and you leave at 5. Everything is set to that rigid, timely routine. You have data and KPIs that you need to track and you need to hit, very much like farming. And there are repeatable tasks, also like farming. You need to do a certain amount of inputs of the same inputs every single day in order for you to hit your KPIs. And then we have life at large. Very methodical, very safe, like farming. Work all of your life, save a certain percentage of your income, or give that certain percentage of your income away to save for retirement, follow the plan, don't take risks, and hopefully you'll have this nest egg by the time you finish life, assuming that you get to that point. Now, for hunters, this is hell, right? Farmers, this is heaven. For hunters, this is absolute hell. And the hunter experience in modern day society is that they get bored as fuck in meetings. They typically resent authority. They hate following the status quo, right? Because they love innovating, and they crave novelty, speed, and autonomy, which is the opposite to farming. It is slow, methodical, predictable. And typically as a result of this, because 80% of people go through the farmer society and the farmer structure and they do well, and 10 to 20% of people go through the farmer structure and they don't do well, then they're seen as the minority. So there must be a problem with these people as opposed to a problem with the structure. So what then happens is that these hunter types are told that they're disruptive, that they're lazy, that they have disorders like ADHD, they're unfocused. And you might resonate with this. You might feel, you know what? I've been told that I have those before. Even though deep inside of me, I know that I have this potential that is there. I'm set and I'm built for a bigger life. You may at some point, whether that be in your school life, whether that be by peers, whether that be in like early employment, whatever it is, you may have been given one of these labels. And ultimately, this isn't a dysfunction. The issue is misalignment. It's because we are living in a construct that is made by farmers. And because the hunter is the minority, everybody believes that it's actually the person that is the issue as opposed to the system, and that the system is not aligned to both brain types. And that is what we're discussing. So the few hunters who ultimately make it through the farmer filtration system, they find themselves drawn to one environment that fits their wiring, and that is entrepreneurship. Why? Because entrepreneurship is modern day hunting. So let's have a little look at the layover between the two. So the hunter trait, you got high energy. Well, how does this apply to business? You drive fast-paced growth and you're action-orientated in leadership. Let's say risk tolerance, another trait. You have an ability to make bold decisions under pressure. Impulsivity, you're able to seize windows of opportunity very quickly. Pattern recognition, you're able to spot market gaps and solve problems incredibly fast, which leads to an immense amount of opportunity, right? Think about Elon Musk, think about Jeff Bezos, think about Thomas Edison, right? Intolerance for boredom. I know I feel this in my bones, which means that you have a thrive and you thrive on constant challenges and variety, which makes you great in the world of business. You have the ability to hyper-focus, which means that grinding during product launches, critical sprints, ultimately there's just times when the work just needs doing, right? You're able to do that, whereas farmer types cannot. And you crave autonomy, which means that you're able to build your own rules and your own systems. Now, it's no surprise that over 50% of successful entrepreneurs exhibit hunter-type traits, despite being the minority in the population. So this is what I found incredibly interesting when researching all of this, is that only 10 to 20% of the population at large are seen to have hunter brain types, and over 50% of entrepreneurs have hunter brain types. So we can see that we all congregate to a similar area, and that's because this is the environment that fits us best. And ultimately, I used to think that entrepreneurs started business because they wanted freedom or it sounded cool. But I've come to realize that it's much, much deeper than that. We do it because our brains give us no other choice, because we're designed for this. And the quicker we can accept this, the better. Now, a question I often get asked: how do I know if I have a hunter brain? And if I do, is it good or is it bad? Well, let me help you answer that. So the hunter brain is very much like a knife. It can be a tool of sculpture, or like for creation and for marveling at beauty, but it can also be the instrument of death, right? So it can make you absolutely unstoppable if you learn how to harness it, or it can be destructive to both your business and your life. So as I say, very much like a knife, It just is, objectively. There's no good or bad. It has both sides. It's very much a double-edged sword. But let me talk you through the light and dark side of the hunter brain, all of which I have suffered from. So challenge number 1, boredom equals death. So hunter brains are wired to crave novelty and stimulation, right? So routine, repetitive tasks like admin, bookkeeping systems are incredibly painful, and they often start strong and they can lose interest very, very quickly. Now, the consequence of this inside a business is that you struggle to follow through with your long-term projects. You abandon initiatives too early, and you constantly chase shiny objects and new ideas, bouncing from one to the other, which is called shiny object syndrome. I'm going to whiz through these because there's 8. Challenge 2, time blindness and poor planning. So the challenge here is that hunters live in the now, right? We see time in now and not now. So immediate threats and instant decisions is what we focus on. Now, this often includes time blindness, difficulty estimating how long tasks will take, or recognizing future consequences. Now, the consequence in business is that it means that we can miss deadlines, we have poor time allocation, we often overpromise and underdeliver, and we have difficulty creating accurate timelines or strategic roadmaps. Challenge number 3, disorganization and executive dysfunction. So the challenge is that hunters aren't wired for fighting systems. They are wired for action, momentum, and movement. Now, executive function, such as like working memory, task initiation, prioritization, is often impaired in hunter brains. Now, the consequence in business is that you'll often find, if you're like me, you've got cluttered inboxes, missed emails, forgotten tasks. You'll have difficulty managing teams and delegating because everything feels mentally overwhelming all of the time. And you'll have these feelings of chaos and stress even when business is doing pretty well. Challenge 4, impulsivity in decisions. So hunters act fast for all of the reasons that I said earlier. So this is a survival advantage in the wild, but it can be very risky in business if not managed. Impulsivity can lead to decisions made without full data or thought. So the business consequence here is that we can make poor hires, we can have bad investments, which I have done. We can have unplanned pivots, which I've also done. We can say yes too easily, then regret it, and we can have difficulty with contracts, cash flow, or sticking to the plan. Challenge 5, emotional intensity and rejection sensitivity. Something that people don't talk about enough. And I think it's because there's like stigma around this and people feel shame around this, but I think it's really important to recognize. So many hunters experience something called rejection sensitivity dysphoria, shortened as RSD. So this is an intense emotional response to criticism or perceived failure. So our emotions can then spike really quickly and regulation can be difficult as a result. So the consequence in business is that taking client feedback can become personal, avoiding sales or difficult conversations, mood crashes affect your productivity and decision making. Challenge 6, burnout from hyperfocus loops. So the hunter brain includes the ability to hyperfocus. So we have hours of intense concentration on something that is stimulating us and that we have an interest in. But ultimately, this isn't sustainable. We can't do this all the time. It comes in waves and then can lead to crashes if we stay too long in this period. Now, the consequence when it comes to business is that if you're working 12-hour days for weeks and weeks on end, followed by days of complete shutdown, it's probably not going to be great for your business. This means that we can have inconsistent output and poor energy management, and we find ourselves in these all or nothing productivity cycles, like these boom bust cycles that we find ourselves in. Challenge 7, difficulty building systems and scaling. So the challenge here is that hunters prefer chaos and intuition. They struggle to build repeatable processes, such as systems, SOPs. Scaling structures can feel slow, boring, and draining. And the consequence in your business is that your business becomes bottlenecked around the founder. I see this all the time with my clients. They have no clear delegation or automation systems, and scaling will feel impossible without total burnout because everything is on your shoulders. Then challenge 8, self-doubt from external expectations. So the challenge here is that growing up in a farmer world, hunters are told that they are wrong, lazy, messy, disruptive all of the time. As I said, because no one ever questions the system, they and will always think that if you are struggling with the system, it must be a you problem and not a system problem. But what then happens is over a long period of time, it will create a lifelong sense of internalized shame, even when we are succeeding. So no matter how much success you basically find, almost like your inner child as such, still doesn't feel good enough. It still feels like there's shame because for the majority of your life, you've always had these progress reports at school, let's say, where it was like, he would be great if, right? And there's always an if on it. If he was like a farmer is ultimately what they're saying. And the business consequence here is that we can often find ourselves with imposter syndrome, even when we're high performing. We self-sabotage before major breakthroughs, and we have difficulty trusting our gut or our leadership abilities because we're always second guessing. So they are the 8 challenges that we face. So let's go into the brain strengths. Start exploring the extraordinary strengths that come with having a hunter brain. So we have 8 strengths. Strength 1, high sensitivity to our environment. Because of this trait that we have, which is constant environmental scanning, we become aware of patterns, cues, and danger, right? So how this almost presents itself to us as a superpower is that we become exceptional at people reading, markets, and opportunities. We pick up on subtle shifts in trends before other people notice. And this makes us powerful marketers, negotiators, and early adopters. So think about the entrepreneur who just knows when the product is about to take off. Strength 2, hyper-focus in high-stakes situations. So the trait is that we have the ability to drop into a deep, single-pointed focus during moments of urgency. And urgency is key here, right? If there is no urgency, we can find it difficult to tap into our motivation center. But if we can create urgency, we are on it. So the modern day power to this is that we can crush high leverage work in sprints. We can thrive during launches, crisis, or tight deadlines. And we are excellent at tackling complex problems under pressure. So again, think about the founder who does 3 hours worth of work in what would take other people 3 days, because the urgency and pressure is there. Strength 3, we are very good at big picture thinking and pattern recognition, right? So we have this trait of being able to constantly jump between ideas, systems, and inputs. It's called multimodal thinking. And the modern day power to this is that we're able to connect dots across industries and disciplines and draw them into our own industry. So we're able to bring like novel ideas elsewhere to improve our own business. We see visionary ideas that others miss. That's why most entrepreneurs are at heart like visionaries. And we're able to create unique business models, branding angles, or solutions. So again, think about the strategist who sees an entire 5-year market evolution from just one trend shift. Again, think about like AI and the amount of people and innovators that have been able to leverage that. Strength 4, action-orientated and fast to execute. So the trait here is that we're impulsive, we're fast-moving, we have a low tolerance for waiting. So the modern day power to this is that we will ship fast, we will pivot quickly, and we will break things to learn faster than other people will. We often get ahead of larger, slower companies, especially like if we're thinking about startups, and we can turn raw ideas into prototypes overnight. So the whole business that I have around the Hunter Brain was thought of and launched within 2 weeks because of this. Strength 5, creative problem solving. So we have a beautiful brain that allows us to think non-linearly, and we have a divergent thinking style. So this allows us to generate original ideas that other people wouldn't even consider. It allows us to think around problems and not just through them. And we always challenge assumptions, which leads to breakthroughs. Number 6, charisma and magnetic energy. You might notice this yourself, in yourself, or within other people who are likely hunters. They have high emotional expressiveness. So they have these natural leadership instincts when they allow themselves to. They're charismatic communicators and storytellers. They naturally lead movements, brands, teams with passion. And they can inspire action and make people believe in a vision. So think about the founder whose passion sells the product before it's even finished. Strength 7, high intuition and a gut-driven decisions. So we have this strong instinctual intelligence, right? We are able to operate with a deep gut feeling for people, timing, and decisions. We have the ability to trust our instinct before data fully confirms it. And we're often right as a result. And we can thrive in uncertain environments where logical planning breaks down for most people. And then finally, strength number 8 is resilience in chaos. We are able to thrive in unpredictable, high stimulus environments. We are calm under fire, even when others feel overwhelmed. We make bold decisions whilst other people freeze, and we embrace risk and we reframe failure as feedback, which means that we fail more frequently and then we succeed quicker in the long run. So ultimately, how do we start to turn your hunter brain into an unfair advantage? Well, I believe having a hunter brain is like being given Iron Man's suit, but without the instructions, right? That's how most of us are living. We have Iron Man suits, but we don't have a fucking clue how to use it. So we just need to learn how to use it so that we can harness it to our advantage, because farmers do not have Iron Man suit. We need to create the environment and circumstances where we can thrive. And this is exactly what I've spent years doing with my clients. And that's ultimately where I've created the Hunter Brain OS. So let me very quickly take you through that. So the Hunter Brain OS is the operating system for founders who are wired with hunter brains, and they are ultimately wired to dominate. So it is a 3-part performance and execution model that is designed to help founders master their internal world, build businesses around their brain, and execute powerfully under pressure so they can consistently and effortlessly execute, because that is ultimately what hunter brains struggle with the most. We are great at big picture thinking, we are great at ideating, but we are not great at execution. And this solves that. Because we do not need more hacks, we need to run the right operating system. So here to the right, you will see there's a little bit cut off, but we have our unfair advantage in the middle. So let me just quickly talk you through the 3 main drivers of this model. Number 1, we have the brain. So here you need to master your internal operating system, right? So we think clearly, we act with integrity, and we move with energy. So this is where the edge starts to begin, in between your 2 ears. It is made up of 3 accelerators, we call them. We've got cognitive control. So this is where you master your attention span, you eliminate distraction, you rewire your brain for focus, not dopamine chaos. A scattered mind is a slow death for a founder. We then have identity integrity. So this is where we start to align your behavior to the man that you say you are, because you do not need more motivation, you need internal alignment. And then we have energy rhythms. So this is where we start to build rituals, routines, and recovery systems that sync with your natural cognitive and hormonal peaks. We then have driver number 2, which is the business. So we design the machine around your brain, not against it, which is how so many people find themselves, is that the brain and the machine that they've built and they're trapped inside of does not work for their brain. So most founders are burning out because they build businesses that demand what drains them, right? So this pillar helps you to build a company that fuels you instead of one that you need to escape from. So there are 3 components of this. We've got aligned design. You create a business structure that reflects your natural strengths, instincts, and energy constraints. We have focus architecture. So we build your weekly execution plan around clarity, constraint, and deep work, removing distractions by design, because if your calendar owns you, your business isn't yours. And then we have neurosystems. This is where you start scaling using systems, delegation, and decision flows built to match how your brain works, not just generic SOPs or how productivity books say that we should work. And then finally, we have the battlefield. So this is where you really start to dominate in the arena. You execute fast, you lead hard and with authority, and you thrive under pressure. So this is where the game is won, not in theory, but in actions, bringing it all together. So the battlefield is your leadership, your execution, your presence, and the ability to thrive in the fire, because that is where business is found. Made up of 3 components too. Effortless execution. This is where we remove friction. We build systems that help you take fast, bold action without hesitation or burnout. We then got conscious command. So you lead with presence, precision, and power. Whether you're in the boardroom, on video, or in conversation, you own the room. And then we have pressure performance. So you stay sharp under stress, you make elite decisions fast, and you thrive in chaos whilst other people naturally fold. So what is next for you? So everything from here on out, inside of the Hunter Brain, is going to be designed to help you go through each one of those pillars and to create systems and strategies for you to create a life and a business that is in alignment with your brain, so you can stop fighting it and you can start using it to create your unfair advantage. So you can start living life with ease, flow, and the freedom that you likely got into business for in the first place. Hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you soon.